Welcome here to the very first episode of Cloud Builder Live. I am thrilled that you're here with me. We've got a lot that we're going to dive into, but when you're coming to this series, you're probably asking yourself, what exactly are we planning to do? So let me go ahead and just start off. Let me just level set by telling you what this series is all about. So here, Cloud Builder Live really is all about helping you actually build real solutions in the cloud instead of just knowing about cloud services. So one of the things that I've seen, because I teach a lot of courses on Pluralsight to help people with certifications and whether it's entry-level certifications or advanced certifications, but in a lot of cases, especially if you're just starting out, sometimes it's hard to know how to take that knowledge that you've gained through studying for a certification to then take it and figure out, how do I actually build something real? So that's what we're going to be doing here on Cloud Builder Live, is helping you truly build real solutions in the cloud. Now, with that being said, let me go ahead and start to dive in and get some information out on what we're actually going to be building today. So let me go ahead and get some stuff ready here. So first of all, here we go. I'm going to show you what we actually have in place. So what you can see here is that there's a repository that you will get access to in the end. And what is in this repository is that you can actually see the application that we're going to be building. Now, the thing about this is the focus of Cloud Builder Live isn't about every single bit of the code. It's about how you actually take it and deploy it into the cloud. So this is what we're going to be focused on. So we're going to have this starter application that we're going to be working with, but then we're going to go through and we're going to figure out how we actually implement that in the cloud. But we're just going to be starting directly from this repository. So I'm going to go ahead and start the process of kind of diving in to get some things going. But here's the catch. As we go along the way, I want you to be able to ask any questions that you may have. So what we want to be able to do is make it so that if you have questions along the way, you can ask them, and then I'll be taking periodic breaks throughout the stream to answer any questions that you have. So with that being said, I'm going to jump over to the terminal, because what we're going to be doing is we're going to go ahead and start the process of cloning this repository, and then we're going to get started. And this will help you understand a bit about what we're going to be doing. So first, I'm going to clone a Git repository here, the one I mentioned earlier. And now once I get into that repository, I'm just going to need to install some things. Now, I should mention here that we're going to be doing a lot of things in this particular episode of Cloud Builder Live focused on AWS with AWS Amplify, and we'll dive into how deep we'll go in that in just a minute. Also here, we're going to be doing some things with Node.js as well as using some JavaScript. So that's just what we're doing in this episode. We'll be doing different things in different episodes. So if JavaScript's not your thing, don't worry. We'll definitely be getting to other things here in the future. So for here, now that I've actually cloned that repository, the next thing I want to do is I'm going to go in and I actually want to change into that directory. And then I want to be able to install some dependencies. And what this is installing the dependencies for this core React app that we're going to be using. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I just want to go ahead and start this, because this is how I'm going to really show you what we're going to be building. So let's give this just a second to load up. Perfect. Now we've got this here. So let me go ahead and get this here. So here is the application that we're going to be working with. Now here I've uploaded some different pictures from a summer trip that my family and I took to a bunch of different national parks. So bonus points if you can actually pick out some of the national parks in these pictures. But what we're doing here is we're actually going to build an application that first can be hosted in the cloud. Right now, I'm just running this locally, but we want to be able to use AWS Amplify to really make this work. The next thing that we're going to do is we want to be able to make it so that we can have users log in, so that it isn't just open to everybody. We also want to have it so that we can protect an individual user's data, and we want to do some cool things with photo processing. Because what you can see here, if I click in on one of these images, here it actually pulls up and gives information like the file file name and the file size, the resolution, the make and model. And then at the bottom, it even has this section called AI tags, where we're using an AI service to get back information about it. Now, I'll go ahead and tell you right now, all of this is fake data. However, during the full session here, what we're going to do is we're going to make this real. So with that being said, we'll be able to actually make this real and make it actually functional. So that's what we're going to be. That's what we're going to be doing. So with all of that said, let me go ahead and show you what we're going to be doing here within AWS Amplify and why AWS Amplify is something that is really well suited for what we're doing here. So with this, AWS defines AWS Amplify as a set of purpose-built tools and features that let front-end web and mobile developers quickly and easily build full-stack applications on AWS with the flexibility to leverage the breadth of AWS services as your use cases evolve. So this is what we're really trying to do. And let me tell you, this helps get over one of the big hurdles that developers have, at least in their conversations with me. And that is, how do I do things the right way? Because let's take something simple like hosting a web application. Well, I can think of 10 different ways you could do that just on AWS. So how do I know if I'm doing it the right way? And how do I know that I'm doing it in a way that's going to work really well both now and in the future? And so AWS started coming out with services. Back in the day, we had Elastic Beanstalk and others, and now we've got AWS Amplify. And really, all these services is a workflow around existing AWS services so that you can use it in a way that follows best practices. So that's what we're going to be doing here, is using AWS Amplify for that specific purpose. So what are we going to use it for? Let's get really specific here. So we're going to use it first for hosting. So with hosting, this is where we're going to actually deploy the React application using Amazon S3 and CloudFront. Then we're going to be using it for authentication and authorization. This is where we're going to be integrating it into an Amazon Cognito user pool and identity pool. Then we're going to use it for storage because we want to be able to store these photos that we upload here. And then we need to use it for serverless processing. This is where we get the ability to use what we would call an event-driven architecture to do some really cool processing on these images and do things like get those AI tags back without having to manage a server whatsoever. We just have to define the custom code that needs to be executed inside of AWS Lambda. So now that we have that in place, now that we understand a bit about what we're going to be doing, let's talk really quickly about the prerequisites here. So we will provide all of the code so that you can go through and do it yourself. I'll talk more about that at the end of the stream because we actually want to highlight the work you're doing as a part of this series. So to do this yourself, there's a few things that you're going to need. First of all, you'll need to have access to an AWS account. The things that we're running will require that. So you will need to be able to configure one. Inside of the repository, it will guide you on how to create one if you don't have one currently. You'll also need to have Node.js configured. And in addition, you're going to need to use the AWS Amplify CLI. However, don't worry about that. I'll guide you through installing that here in just a second. So let me go ahead and we're going to move over here to the browser again really quick. And I want to show you here that first of all, I do have an AWS account that we are already logged into. And if I look in here, for example, in S3, you're going to see that there's really only one particular bucket here that's really around. And that is the one that has our sample photos that are loading up within the application. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be adding to this particular account. And this is one I have just for my work here on Cloud Builder Live. So now that we have that in place, and now that you see that, let's go ahead and go back over here to the terminal. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cancel out of actually running the React application. And I want to go ahead and show you that if you're going to install the Amplify CLI, all you have to do is execute npm install -g and then what you see here. Now, what that's going to do is this is actually going to install it globally on your machine. That's how AWS recommends that you install it. And then once you have that in place, you'll be able to then get it to interact with the different projects that you have that would utilize the Amplify CLI. So I'm not going to install it here just yet because I already have it installed on my machine. But again, just by executing this, you could be ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of that, and we'll start the process here of moving forward. However, before we dive into implementing our first key piece with AWS Amplify, which is hosting, I want to check and see, are there any questions that anybody has through what we've done so far? And I'll go ahead and monitor here and see if there's any questions that we need to dive into. Perfect. So not seeing any just yet, which is awesome. And what I want to do is I want to go ahead and now push in and implement the first piece of this, which is going to be hosting. And again, if you say, oh, I've got a question, don't worry, we'll get to it in just a minute. I'm going to try to take several breaks throughout the stream here. Now, the way that Amplify works is that Amplify needs to go in and find out some things about your project. And then once it does, you will then be able to actually utilize the functionality that's included with it. So we have a link that's actually going to be posted to the Amplify documentation. You'll be able to go through and dive deeper into any of these areas because we're not going to go into all the detailed configuration that you can do for each of these. So now that we have the Amplify CLI installed, what we're going to do here is we're going to run a command called amplify init. Now, I should tell you something here. If you haven't worked with Amplify at all, there is one command that you should run first, and that is going to be amplify configure, because amplify configure will help you set up access to your AWS account. I already have that configured for mine, so I'm going to jump right to amplify init, which is what you call when you want to start integrating Amplify into your existing project. Now here, when I run amplify init, it's going to ask us here for a name for the project. I'm just going to keep the same name, the default name that it has here. And then one of the cool things about Amplify is it knows about things like React applications. So you don't have to tell it certain things. It can look inside of the project and say, hey, this is actually utilizing React. I know how to build it by running npm run script build. I know how to start it. All of these things are known because it inspects your application. So with this being said, I'm going to say, hey, this configuration is great. I'm not going to change it. So I'll just say yes. And here it's going to tell us that it's using the default provider, which is CloudFormation. Now, a quick note on that. CloudFormation is what you use to define your infrastructure in AWS as code. Now, one of the great things is you don't have to learn every single bit about CloudFormation to utilize AWS Amplify. But if you want to leverage custom CloudFormation as you learn more, you have the ability to do that within your Amplify project. So in some ways, it can kind of grow with you. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we need to be able to go in and tell it how it's going to access our AWS credentials. Now, if you went through and you ran Amplify configure, you can utilize the profile that was just created. I'm going to go through and select one here that I have for Cloud Builder Live. And this is how it will get permission to interact with my AWS account. So it's going to go through the process here of starting to build some things out. And I see that we do have a few questions that have come through. So first of all, it says, where are you running this code? That's from Networking Labs. That is a great question. So everything you see here is running on my machine, which is a Mac. It's going to be very similar if you're on Windows, but this is not actually running in the cloud. You actually can run this from your machine. Now, if you wanted to get fancy, you could do it from another machine, but this is the way that most developers are going to work with it, is they're going to be doing it from their local machine. Another question is here, is the CLI the only way to install? It's really the only way that you want to leverage for Amplify. You could go through and do some of this by hand and then just try to integrate it in with the AWS console, but that's going to be a lot of extra work. So I would definitely recommend using the CLI over other approaches that you could take with AWS Amplify. And that was a question from TaylorMade Media. So great questions out of the gate. I absolutely love it. So the next thing we want to talk about here is how do we add stuff once we configure our projects with Amplify? And one of the great things here is this is a pretty simple integration here at the beginning. So we're just going to say amplify, and then we're going to say add. And what do we want to add here? Well, in this case, we want to add hosting. So we're going to go ahead and say Amplify add hosting. Now, every module within Amplify that has different capabilities, it's going to have different configuration options. However, the CLI is going to basically work with you on guiding you through what those configuration options are. So we're going to choose the first option here, which is hosting with Amplify Console. This is the newer of the two options. And here, even though the other option says Amazon CloudFront and S3, I'll let you in on a little secret. This option also uses CloudFront and S3. So I'm going to go ahead and hit enter for that. And then it's going to ask me how I want to deploy the application. Now, here's a cool thing. If you want to do continuous deployment with your Git repository, you can actually set that up here by just clicking continuous deployment, and then there will be some additional steps you need to do to connect it to your repository. But Amplify gives you continuous deployment in a very, very easy, just a few steps to get it up and running. So if you have a Git repository for your project that you want to work with, this is a great way to go. For me here, because we're doing this, I want to be able to just do a manual deployment, so be able to push when I want to. So I'm going to select manual deployment, and now it tells me that I'm ready to go, and all I have to do is run Amplify publish. So I'm going to head and run Amplify publish, and we'll see here that it's going to start this process. Now, I should mention here that there really are two commands that you can leverage to actually push your changes. Publish is what we will use most of the time because that's going to push both the front end and the back end code. If you just wanted to do the back end, you can do Amplify push. So it's going to tell me here that it needs to create hosting. So do I want it to continue? I'm going to go ahead and say yes, absolutely. I want it to continue. So let me tell you what we're doing here and what the benefit is of working within AWS Amplify. So as I mentioned, Amplify knows about React applications. So because Amplify knows about React applications, what it's going to do is it's going to create an S3 bucket. That's where our actual files are going to be stored. And Amazon S3 is the primary storage service on AWS. It's then going to deploy it out with Amazon CloudFront, which is their content delivery network. Now, it knows about the React application, so it knows that it needs to build that React application before it actually pushes it out and deploys it. So it's actually going through and doing that now. Matter of fact, if I switch back over here to where you can see the terminal, you can see it actually just finished building, and it's going through the deployment process. So here, once it's done with the deployment process, we can see here that it actually gives us a URL. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to navigate over here to the browser. We're going to open up a new tab, and we're going to open up the browser here. Now, what you'll notice here is this is the exact same application that we were running locally. We've managed to get this deployed, and this is deployed again on a content delivery network. It's actually deployed, using an HTTPS, and it's all ready to go. So simply adding in hosting was a pretty easy lift here from the beginning. There weren't a whole lot of additional steps that we had to worry with. So, quick question here. Are there any questions on the hosting process by leveraging AWS Amplify? Because I'm going to get ready here for us to move into the next area where we will be adding in authentication and authorization. So I just want to check and see if there's any questions. Okay. So here we go. I'm going to go ahead and push forward now with adding in auth. Now, auth is interesting here, and I want to call out a few bits of this because really when we're talking about auth at any point, we're really talking about both authentication and authorization. So these are two different terms that have two different meanings. So the first here, authentication, is we need to know who a user is. And what we want to do here is we want to make it so that users have to sign in to access our application. But then we also have authorization. That means we want to know what you can do as a user. And what we want to do here is we want to make it so that each user gets to manage their own photos and only see their own photos. They don't get it from everybody else. So with that being said, that's what we're going to go ahead and implement next. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to do just as I did before. I'm going to say Amplify add, and then we're going to add auth. Now, the service that we use on AWS for authentication and authorization is Cognito. Now, I need to speak with you honestly here because, I don't work for AWS, so I can be honest about some things here. Cognito is a service that I both love and hate all at the same time. It is the easiest way to get up and running with authentication if you have a web application, for example, and you'll see why in just a minute. But in addition to that, there also is there's some challenges that can come with implementing some more complex workflows with Cognito. Also, it's not a service that's updated as often as others. But that being said, you can do this for a fraction of the cost of using other solutions like Okta, for example, or Auth0 or any of those other solutions. It's going to be quite a bit cheaper. As a matter of fact, it's going to be free up through your first many users. I forget the exact cap there, but there's a huge point where it's completely free to use Cognito. So, and somebody, I see somebody here asking, where does CloudFront come in? So CloudFront is the actual deployment of our application out to all the different edge servers for AWS. So this way, instead of if I'm in, for example, and I'm actually here in Tennessee in the United States, then I would be able to go to a server that's near me. But if I'm loading it from Singapore, I would be able to go to a server, an edge server that's near me to actually load this content. So CloudFront basically takes it and distributes it globally to the different AWS edge servers. But that's a great question. Now, next, we have the option here for how we want to use Cognito. I'm going to select default configuration, and I want users in this case to sign up with their email address. So I'm going to select email. And it's going to ask me here if I want to configure any advanced settings, and I'm just going to say, nope, I'm done. I'm just going to stay with the default settings here. So it's going to go through the process now of finishing up. And just as before, it tells us here we can run Amplify Published to do our front end and back end, or we can just do Amplify Push. Now, what I want to do here is I'm just going to go ahead and say Amplify Push, and then we're going to go in and start working within the React application. So I need to wait for it here. It needs to ask me one question. It needs me to confirm this. And you can see here it's going to say, hey, do you want me to create auth? And I'm going to say yes, I absolutely want it to go ahead and create auth. So that'll be going on. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do is we're going to go ahead and I'm going to open up one second here. We're going to go ahead and open this up in VS Code so we can actually start working within the React application. And I want to go ahead and just open up a file here that's going to be app.js. Now, this is really the entry point for our application, and there's a few different methods in here, but what I want to really be focused on is we want to have it so that nothing here actually shows unless the user is authenticated. And you might be thinking here, we're going to have to write a bunch of custom code to do this. There's a lot of heavy lifting that we're going to have to worry about. But the truth is here is we're going to leverage some different libraries that are provided by AWS Amplify to make this a fairly easy implementation versus just doing everything custom on our own. Now, to do this, what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to install those libraries. So I'm going to go ahead and open up a new terminal. And what I want to do here is I just want to run npm install and then the specific libraries that we're going to be working with, which in this case is going to be AWS Amplify and then the React components for AWS Amplify. Now I'm going to go ahead, I'll try to even make this just a little bit bigger to make this easier for everybody to see here. And so I'm going to go ahead now and I'm going to install these two libraries. So we'll let those install. Now what I'm going to do next, while that's actually going, I'm going to go ahead and start modifying my app.js file. So what we want to do here is we want to make it so that we can get all of the information about authentication included and then wrap our entire application in one of the components that's provided by Amplify. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to import Amplify. We're going to import a component called Authenticator. We're going to bring in some styles. And then we're pulling in a file here called AWS exports, and then we're configuring Amplify with that. Now, if I go open up AWS exports, there's really not a lot there yet, but this is the file that AWS uses to keep connected with what is actually in the cloud and what is local. So with this, for example, once it finishes creating everything for auth for us, for authentication and authorization, we're going to see a bunch more values listed in here. So this lets our React application know what those values need to be. Now, the next thing we're going to do after that is we're going to go through and we're going to use this authenticator component around our application. So here, we're going to go in and we're going to use the authenticator component. And then I'm going to go down here below this last div and we'll close out this tag. And then I'll adjust spacing because it drives me crazy if I don't. We'll put our indent correct here. And I want to call out a couple things with this. First of all, this is completely configurable. So here we're telling it that we want it to log in with email, and here we're actually passing in a sign out function. Now you might notice here that we already have a sign out function, but we're just passing in, we actually have a parameter and we're just passing in an empty function. So I actually want to make this really work. So we're going to update this with that sign out function that we brought in. Let me fix a few things here. So now that I've saved that, now we're going to be ready to actually push our application. So I'm going to go back to our terminal over here. We can see that it did push all of the changes for auth, for Cognito. So I'm going to go ahead and say amplify and just publish. That's going to actually enable us to, it'll check the back end, but it'll see that it's already deployed everything. And then it's going to push out this front end change that we just put in. Now, here's kind of the moment of truth, right? If everything works, when we load this application up in the browser, we should see that it's not going to let us into the application. It's going to stick at that login screen. Now, I'll tell you this about the login screen. Even though I'm just using the stock styles that come with Amplify, it is completely configurable. So you can adjust styles on it. You can add in headers and footers to it and other things to completely style it according to your application. I've worked with multiple clients and we've implemented some very styled versions of this, and it's been a great solution overall for, again, not having to roll your own. So I see a question here that came in just a little bit ago while we're waiting on this to deploy is, will Python run the same install as NPM? So in this case, you're going to still need to use Node.js to actually install the Amplify CLI. So even if you have Python on a machine, you can also install Node.js. Now that doesn't mean you can't use Python. We're going to be using Node.js later for a Lambda function, but you can absolutely use Python, use any of the supported languages that you want with that. So it's not limiting you, but you will need to have that for the CLI. But that is a great question. So I can see here that I've got this deployed. So I'm going to go ahead next and we'll switch back over and I'm going to reload my browser. And what we should see is exactly what we do see. And I'm going to go ahead and show this to you here that we now have a login screen. And this login screen gives us the ability to create an account. Now, you could configure Cognito to not enable that if you wanted. So you basically only admins could create accounts, for example. But in this case, I wanted to go ahead and show you what it would be like to implement this so that users could actually go in and actually create their own accounts. So we're going to set one up here. We're just going to go ahead and enter in. I'll enter in my email address. I'll enter in a password. And now we'll hit create account. Now, by default, Cognito does a validation, an email validation, and all of this is baked into the service. And so it's going to send me a code that I need to actually enter in to make sure that it really is my email address. And one of the great things about this is that all the UI elements for any of those challenges that may happen are provided within the React components for Cognito, which is a part, again, of Amplify. So all of this is something that's provided for you. Now, when we do this, you can now see that we actually have a real application here that we can now actually sign out of, and we can sign back into it. So I'm going to go ahead and sign in again, just as we did before. And perfect. Now we're in the application. Now, there's still a ton left to do, though, because we still have fake images, or not necessarily fake images, but we have images that aren't the actual images that a user has uploaded. So we still have some work to do, but for the moment, just limiting access into our application has worked with Amplify as expected. So it took a fair amount here to actually go in and implement auth, a little bit more than it did for hosting, but still we basically needed to just run a few commands, accept the defaults, and then we could test it out with our application. So if you have any questions about auth or hosting up to this point, feel free to go ahead and ask those questions while I get ready here to implement the next portion, which is going to be implementing the storage for our application. I'm also going to take a sip of coffee. Okay. So I'm going to go back here to the terminal, and I'm going to go ahead and add in the next module, which again is going to be storage. So we're going to say amplify add storage, but there is a caveat. So here is the issue that we have. Anytime you're dealing with a service like Amplify that wraps around existing services, sometimes something might not work exactly as you think it would. So when I went through and set this up, there was an issue where if I didn't create my Lambda function first, and you'll see what I mean by that in just a minute, then it could potentially get into a situation where there was a dependency that couldn't be resolved. So to fix this, I'm going to go ahead, instead of adding storage, I'm going to say add function. Now we're not going to do anything with this function yet, but it is something that will enable us to not hit an error later. And again, this is, again, I told you I don't work for AWS, so I'm just kind of telling you that you will occasionally run into issues like this. One of the great things, though, is I do feel like there's a pretty vibrant community around Amplify, and obviously there's a vibrant community here around ACG. And so you're able to find support if you run into issues, as well as even answering, any GitHub issues that you post to Amplify as well. So they are fairly active in that. So I'm going to create here a Lambda function that's just a serverless function, and I'm going to call this photo processing, and it's going to be Node.js, but again, you could easily do .NET Core, Go, Java, Python. Those are the options that are provided out of the box, and I want to just do hello world in this case. We'll replace this code later, and in this case, I don't want to configure any advanced settings, so we'll say no. So it'll take it just a second here. It's going to say, do I want to edit the function now? And no, I don't. So I'm just going to say no. Now, once we have this function in place, we now have the ability to go in and do amplify add storage. So what this will do is it'll guide us through the process of setting up storage that is specific for our application. So our application data itself. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and say enter. And it's going to ask me what type of storage do I want. So I'm going to select content. I'll select that in just a second. The other option here is NoSQL database. And if you were to choose this option, it would configure DynamoDB for you, which is AWS's fully managed NoSQL database. So you can actually have both of these. You don't have to just pick one or the other. You could have multiple different storage components for content, and you could have a NoSQL database as well. We're not going to use a database here. We're actually going to make a fully functional application without a database just by using S3. So I'm going to select content. Now, once I select content, it's going to basically say that I need to provide a friendly name. Well, I'm going to call this photos because this is where we're storing our photos. Now, it says that I need to provide a bucket name. I can just accept the default that they have here because, again, our end users aren't going to necessarily see this bucket name. So even though this is a really, really long name, I'm totally okay with that. Next, it's going to say who has access. And here's some of the power of AWS Amplify. It knows that we have already added in auth. And here is where we get to configure some authorization for the users that are added to our application. So here I'm going to say I only want authenticated users to have access to these photos. And it's going to say, well, what access do you want for them? Well, I want all of these. So I'm going to select that I want them to have create, update, read, and delete access. So now that I've selected all of those, I'm going to hit enter. And it's going to say, do you want to add a Lambda trigger for your S3 bucket? And this is why we created that function first, because we do want it to do this. And let me explain to you why. we're going to be implementing here something called an event-driven architecture. So instead of us having to create an API where we could actually upload a file, and then as we upload it, we want to maybe make a thumbnail, we want to do some manipulation to it, we want to do all these things, and then we return back the result to the API. What we want to be able to do here is simply say, anytime a new photo gets added into our S3 bucket, we just want it to go through and execute some code, right? And we want it to execute some code in a way that we don't have to manage a server or a queue or any of the things that we normally would have to do if we weren't doing it in this manner. So that's what we're going to be implementing here. So we want to be able to execute our custom Lambda function with every time a new photo gets uploaded into an S3 bucket. So with that being said here, I'm going to say, yes, I do want to add a Lambda trigger. And it's going to say, well, do you want to create a new one or do you want to use an existing one? Well, we've already created one. And so perfect. We now says, well, you only had one, so I'm going to pick that one. And now we're able to go through. And actually add that in. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and type in amplify and then push. This way it's going to push our back end, and we'll have this go through before we actually start editing our React application, which we'll do next, because we want this to be creating in the background. Perfect. So now that this is running, let's go ahead and head over to React. Now I'm going to go to another file here. So under services, this is where we have all of our fake integration here with data, because it's really not getting data from anywhere yet. We actually are pulling everything from our fixtures file. And this is what's giving us this list of photos and this detail about a photo. Again, all of it's fake at this point. So with that being said, we're going to make it all work now for real. So I want to go here under my services file. We're going to need to update these functions. You can see these functions are get photos, so get the list, upload a photo, get a single photo, delete a single photo, and then download a single photo. So we want to implement these. We're not going to implement all of them just yet, but we are going to implement some of them here. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to actually bring in the storage object from AWS Amplify. And because, again, Amplify knows about both our client-side application, so our React app, and it knows about what we've implemented in the cloud, it knows, for example, how to get to our S3 bucket. Now, the first function we're going to implement here is upload photo. So I'm going to go here to upload photo, and I moved around and didn't find it. There it is. So I'm going to go ahead and replace this. And you can see here that with this, we're just calling the put function on the storage object. Again, it knows about, because we've already configured it, it knows whether or not our user is authenticated, and it knows the bucket that it needs to put things in. And so we're telling it here, we want it to store it at a private level. Now, what this does within AWS Amplify, if it's private, that means it is just for this single user. And this is also how it utilizes best practices for us, because it doesn't just say, well, in code, I'm going to keep people from not accessing files that they don't have or that they don't own, but it actually utilizes behind the scenes AWS IAM, or Identity and Access Management, to actually limit it so that unless you are a logged in user that owns that, you truly can't access that S3 file because of the way that it has configured the proper permissions. So this is an example, again, of how AWS implements best practices with Amplify here. And you certainly could do all of this yourself. You could do every single bit of this without AWS Amplify, but it does make it easier to implement these best practices within your applications. So let's go ahead and implement this. So we've got upload photo, that's there. Let's next go to download photo. We want to actually implement that. Then in addition to download photo, we want to do delete photo. And all of these work pretty much the same. Now, if you look at this, and I realize not all of you here are JavaScript developers, you might look at this and say, David, this is a little strange. Why are you creating an array with one file and then looping over that one item in the array to delete it? Well, I'll let you in on a little secret. Eventually, we're going to have 3 files for every photo that we upload. So we'll update this function later with some additional information on how to be sure we're deleting all of those files. Now, after we do delete photo, we now need to go to get photos. So I'm going to go here to get photos, and this one's going to be a little bit longer, but I want to explain to you what it is. And also here, I'm going to need to create one object that'll live here within this particular JavaScript file. We're first going to get a list of all of our photos. Okay. Now, this list is going to be everything that's just specific to our user. And we know that because we said that this is a private level. That means things that are just scoped to my single user. Now, in addition to this, also what we're saying is that we want to go through and get each of these photos. Well, you might say, well, why do we need to get it? Well, in this case, I've got download set to false. So really what we're doing here is we're saying we want to get a signed URL to this file because none of these photos are going to be public. All of these are going to be behind authentication. So we're going to create a signed URL for each of these, and that's how we're going to be able to access these photos. So now that we have this in place, I'm going to be sure that all the files here are saved. We'll go back over here and we're going to type in amplify publish. And this will actually push this out. And if this works, what this means is that we'll be able to actually upload our own photos and we should be able to see them in the application. Now, we didn't implement one method yet, and that is going to be the get details for a single photo, because we're going to need to work with our custom Lambda function on that first. So we'll get to that in just a minute. But here we were able to utilize this to push out photos. So we should be able to get upload to actually work. It also means that when we load the application this time, we shouldn't see any photos at all. It should have a screen saying, hey, you don't have any photos. You might want to go upload some. So that's what we're going to be looking for. So that has now deployed. So now we're going to bring back up the browser. I'm going to reload. And perfect. Exactly as we thought. We need to upload a photo here. So I'm going to go ahead and say upload photo. And I'm going to go here to the sample photos. And I'm going to go ahead and pick an image here. And we're going to see that it's starting the process of uploading that. So while this is uploading here, I see that there is a question here about, will I be able to view the IAM policies that Amplify creates? And this is an overall question that I don't want to miss, because I think this is really important here to note that we can actually see everything that Amplify does. Because as I mentioned, Amplify is really just a workflow around existing AWS services, plus some custom tools and component libraries that go with it. So for example, if I go over here to AWS, I can go into IAM, for example, and I would be able to see all of the policies that have actually been defined. So I can look here, you can see here the different roles that are available, and we won't dive into all the specifics of these, but you can see we do have an authenticated role and an unauthenticated role. And so with this, you can go in and see what is configured there. And I'll also show you later how you can edit some of those permissions. But we can see that. I can, for example, I can go under S3, and under S3, I can go in and see the bucket that was just created, right? So I can, and that's going to be this particular bucket right here. And this is going to have the photos. You can see that's in a private directory. I need to make this a little bigger. And you can see we just uploaded image 1. There it is. So you can absolutely see everything that Amplify does. You can actually see that within the different services that it uses. We could go in, for example, to CloudFront and see a distribution there. We could go in and we could see all the different levels of the different services that we're using for Amplify. So it says here, there's another question on the private level for this user. Does Amplify use federation, or are those credentials temporary? So in this case, the way that we have it configured, our Cognito user pool is our user database. And once we sign into that, it actually gets temporary credentials that we can use to call AWS services through an identity pool. And so it actually has a JSON web token that the Amplify framework within React actually knows how to get the correct token and actually store it locally, and then how to refresh that token based on the rules you've configured. But that's another area where you can totally configure within Cognito, the default timeout amounts for all of those things. So there's a great deal of configuration you can do within Cognito based on how you want that to work. Now, you can also use identity federation outside of Cognito. So you could utilize something like Active Directory, for example, to be your user database that could then know how to work within Cognito with an identity pool to also get back credentials. So again, there's a lot of complexity there based on what you want to do, but there's a lot of things that are possible based on how you need to configure authentication and authorization for your application. Perfect. So with that being said, we've added in, let's just go back through the list. We've added in hosting, we've added in authentication and authorization, we've added in storage for our photos, and we've verified that that works. There's one real step left that I want us to take a look at. And that is, I want us to implement this custom processing. This is what's really going to enable this application to work. Like I said, I want all of this data over here on the right side where it gives us like the file name and the file size and these AI generated tags. I want all of that kind of stuff to actually be real. I want it to actually work. And I'll make that a bit bigger so you all can see that, because right now all of this is just fake data. So let's go ahead and figure out how we're going to make that happen. So give me just a second here to get ready. And we're going to go through next, and we're going to update the function that we created previously. So I'm going to go back here into the terminal. And just like you say amplify add, in this case, I'm going to say amplify function update. So with amplify function update, this is going to enable me to just update the configuration of one of my functions. Now, let me explain what we're going to be doing with this. So let's bounce over here to slides here again real quick. So with processing, I want to do several different things. First of all, I want us to actually go in and generate a thumbnail for the image. Because right now, when we go to that list view, it's loading the whole big image. And these are like 1.5 to 3 megabytes per image. So we want to create a thumbnail. The next thing that I want to be able to do is I want to be able to get the metadata out of the image, right? So have a way that we can look in and figure out things like when was it taken? What camera was it taken with? All that kind of stuff. We could go crazy on that one if we wanted to and get like GPS coordinates out of there and draw a map and everything else. We're not going to do all of that, but we want to get that metadata. Then I want to use a service called Amazon Rekognition. Now, what this service does, this is AWS's computer vision service. And I want to be able to take this, give it an image and say, hey, give me labels. Now, a label is basically just what does that computer vision model see, right? Maybe it sees a tree or a mountain or, a person or those kinds of things. And it even will tell you where it sees that within the image. So we're going to utilize Rekognition as well. So we want to do AI tagging. And then ultimately what we're going to do is we're going to save all of this data back to a JSON file that we'll store in S3. So when we go load a photo, when we go into that detail view, we're going to pull back that metadata and those labels within that JSON file. And here's kind of the interesting thing about that is, again, we're able to actually build out something here that's pretty much fully functioning and actually doesn't use a database at all. We're just using S3 to actually store the data. So this is what we're going to be working on. So the first thing we're going to need to do here is we're going to need to do something called add in a Lambda layer. So Lambda, again, is serverless compute. It enables us to execute some custom code. But every now and then within our custom code, we need it to have some additional capabilities. In this case, I want to have the graphics magic library available on my Lambda function so that I can create a thumbnail. Now, I didn't have to create this myself. There's actually a public Lambda layer that I can utilize, and we utilize this ARN here, this identifier, to add it into our function. Now, I've already got that ready to go, so I'm going to go back over here to the terminal, and I want to go ahead now and select that my function is the one I want to update, and I want to go to Lambda layers configuration. And I want to say that, yes, I want to enable Lambda layers. And here is the identifier for that particular Lambda layer that I want to add. And it says, do I want to edit the function now? No, we'll get there in just a second. I want to go ahead and get this in place. So what we've done is we've just basically added a capability to our Lambda function so that in a minute, we can write some custom code that will generate a thumbnail for our image. Okay, so now that that's in place, let's head back over into our application. And in this case, we're not going to be looking just yet at anything within the React application. We're going to go under this Amplify directory that we haven't touched yet. So here within this Amplify directory, I'm going to go here under Backend. And then under Backend, I'm going to go under Function. And here is where we can see our photo processing function. And there is a source directory in here. So with this, what I need to do is I'm actually going to change into that here into this terminal as well. So we'll go under Amplify, Backend, Function, and then Photo Processing. The next thing, I guess I also need to go into the source directory. So this is just like any other Node.js application in that you've got a package.json file, you've got your index.js file. That's the code that actually executes. If you had created a Python function, this would look, you'd have your requirements.txt, you'd have all that in there. So this is going to work in very much the same way. Now I want to do a couple of things first. The first is we need to install some packages for our function. So we're going to install two. One is called EXIF. That's going to let us get at that metadata. And the other is called GM for Graphics Magic. That's what's going to enable us to be able to create a thumbnail. So we'll go ahead and put that in. And you can see we've added those packages. The next thing that I want to do here, and I'm actually going to go ahead and close this terminal, is we can now look at some of the kind of behind the scenes stuff with Amplify. So here you can see this is the CloudFormation template that has been generated for our function. And if you're not familiar with CloudFormation, don't worry about this yet. You probably won't need to get in and edit anything yet. What I do want to do though, is I want to go in and change a couple of quick values with this. But first of all, I'll point out you can see our Lambda layer that was added here to the function. The first thing that I want to do is I want to go in here and actually change this so that the memory size is a little bit bigger than the default. So instead of 128, I'm going to set that to 1024. And I'm going to go here for this timeout and I'm going to actually make this be 60 seconds because in some cases we might be dealing with some large images and we want to be sure that our Lambda function has all the needed processing power to create those thumbnails and do some processing. So now that I've added that in, I'm going to show you another behind the scenes piece here. We talked a little bit earlier about IAM policies. Now, we need to give our Lambda function the ability to call Amazon Rekognition because by default, it can't. So what I want to do here is I'm going to actually highlight this and I'm going to paste in a new value, which is going to say that we want to be able to call detect labels on the Rekognition service. And we want to be able to do that on any resource for anything that we're passing in. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. And this gives us the ability to tweak two different areas of configuration for our Lambda function. Now that we've put this in place, we're going to go ahead and just drop in the code that's going to do the processing for us. So I'm going to highlight this entire handler function and I'm going to paste in some code and I'm going to walk you through it real quick. Now you'll have access to this within the repository. So don't worry about trying to feverishly understand every bit of this. Like I said, Cloud Builder Live is not all about every single line of code. It's about knowing how services can work together in the cloud. So what we're doing here is we're getting in an event because if you remember, S3 is actually triggering this function for us. We don't have to trigger this manually. So S3 is going to pass it information about the file that changed. We'll log out that information. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go in and say, you know what, if this is not a new object, or if this is just a thumbnail or a JSON file, we're just going to drop it. We're not going to do anything else. But if it is an image that a user has uploaded, we're going to go through and generate a thumbnail. We'll save that thumbnail to S3 under the thumbnails directory. We're then going to go through and get those image labels out of Rekognition. We'll get the photo metadata, and then we'll upload all of that to a JSON file within S3. So now that we have this in place, we can save it, and we're going to go ahead and run Amplify push so that our backend gets deployed. And then we're going to need to update just a couple of the functions that we have for our services inside of our React application. So you'll see here that it needs to do some updates. We'll tell it to do that. We'll open up VS Code. And from here within VS Code, we're just going to make a few quick edits here. So we need to first update our Get Photo service. So I'm going to go down here to Services. And this is the one that we haven't yet implemented. So I'm going to go here to Get Photo. And this one here gets that photo URL like we did before and the JSON metadata, and it returns that data. And the next thing that we're going to do is we're also going to change our Get Photos. And really, we're only changing a single bit here, and that is that we're going to be getting the photos out of our thumbnails directory because now we have these nice thumbnails that we can leverage. So once we have this in place, we really have all the different components in place to see our application working as intended. So I can see here that it's still updating. And so we'll give it just a second and then we'll publish out our changes to the UI. But as we're kind of winding down here, we're getting very, very close to the finish line. I'm just curious, are there any questions that anybody has about any of the work that we've done so far here in this application? I can promise you that things always deploy just a little bit slower when you're doing a live demo. So there's no doubt about that. So it's finishing up here. And what I'm going to do next is we're just going to publish, which actually will build and push out our Amplify application, our React application. So here we go. It says it's just finishing updating things here. And then what we're going to do is I'm going to talk to you next about just kind of how you take kind of the next step in this. But I want to get this one deployment to finish, and then we'll jump into those items. Okay, so now I've got to run one more command here. We'll publish out the application. So here we go. Let me go ahead and let's talk about a couple of things really quick. So I'm going to switch over here to slides just real quick. First of all, here is the kind of a short link to the repository. So you can actually get in and get access to this code yourself. And you can follow along. You'll notice there in the README, it tells you that you have kind of a beginning branch, which is the main branch. And then there is also a finish branch where you can get access to all the code and all the configuration that I have done previously. Now, I would recommend going ahead and starting with that root application. And then after that, go through and follow along here with this video, which will be published out. Again, you'll be able to see it on YouTube after we're done recording. And with that, you can then follow along and build this out step by step. But if you want to go ahead and get access to the full code, you can do that also. But with that being said, let's go ahead and head back over here to the terminal, and we can see that everything has deployed. So next, I'm going to bring back up our application. We're going to go in and actually reload. Oh, that's the localhost version. That's not the one I wanted. Here's the one I wanted. So I'm going to go ahead now, and you'll notice it's not showing anything because we didn't create a thumbnail for that first image. But I'm going to go ahead and select a photo. I'm going to go ahead and pick this one. We can see now that this one is uploading. We'll give this just a second to finish. And now I'm going to go ahead and click on this. And here's what you'll see. We actually have real data. I've got a real file name, a real file size, the real resolution, make and model, and it gives me these labels that were generated by AWS Rekognition: nature, outdoors, person, human, mountain, roads, scenery, landscape, mesa, and plateau. Now, I won't quiz anybody. This is actually from Mesa Verde National Park in southwest Colorado that we went to this summer. It's an amazing view from this spot. But now we actually have this application working as intended. We built out hosting so that we're using S3 and CloudFront. We built out authentication with Cognito. We were able to go through and implement secure storage using authentication with S3. And finally, we did custom processing of our images with Lambda. Now, I want to tell you about a couple things. First of all, we want to hear your story of how you build this yourself. Maybe you just use this as a starting point for your own application, or you go through and follow step by step with what I did. We're going to have a Google form that you can fill out because we want to be able to talk to you and maybe even interview you at the beginning of the next Cloud Builder Live episode, because we want your stories to be the stories that we focus on here on Cloud Builder Live, because ultimately that helps everybody learn how to build more in the cloud. In addition, you'll be able to follow along in Discourse. So as you're building things out, you'll be able to follow along with, I'll be in there. You'll have other community members in there helping you out if you run into any trouble. And also ultimately, you'll be able to just to stay connected through upcoming episodes of Cloud Builder Live. As I mentioned, we have another one coming up on AWS, and then we're going to be jumping over into Azure, and we're going to have a ton of great ones all throughout this year. So certainly, I thank you for joining me for this first episode of Cloud Builder Live, and I'm excited to see what you are going to build.